This is interesting for the Saints. Mike, I know you sent us an incredible stat that measures the impact of an interim coach in their first week, and that's what Darren Rizzi was last week.
That's right.
The Saints had been on a terrible, I think a 7-game losing streak after starting the season absolutely on fire, and they made the switch at coach, and it gave them the initial jump start they were hoping, and that traditionally they get. Are we going to show that number?
Yeah, do you want the stat?
Yes. Yeah, call it up while the guys answer this, because it really is astounding if it's self-explanatory and it doesn't need anything. You can look at it and see what it says there. Teams get a bump when they bring in the interim head coach.
For one game.
For one game.
Yeah.
And then they go back to what they were, 31-65 in all other games after that first game bump. Are we going to see that with the Saints, or are we going to see this new world New Orleans Saints that we saw last week?
I mean, now part of the reason they played so poorly during that losing streak, even though he's not great, is that Derek Carr missed a bunch of those games, and their backup options are even worse. But still, I mean, the Saints, their wide receiving core is decimated. Their only really good player in terms of skill positions is Alvin Kamara, who's an excellent player, but they don't really have much else. I mean, their second best option right now is probably Taysom Hill, who's, it's just a weird kind of player.
Just a bit of a gimmick.
Yeah, exactly. But so, no, I don't think the Saints are any good. The reason you get that bump because it's a new man in town and the players get fired up. But in the end, most teams that fire their coach in the middle of the season are bad teams for a reason. And they end up being bad teams again after getting that initial one-game boost.
I mean, I've seen the Browns lose to worse teams. I've seen them lose to the Raiders.
Nobody's saying they can't lose.
They lose to Gardner Minshew and no receivers, and no Max Crosby, and no Devontae Adams. I've seen Malik Neighbors is a nice young rookie. I see him run around and look like he was the greatest thing since sliced bread. Hey, listen, the Commanders ran circles around the Browns in the secondary. To me, I look at this. They're going to get a little bit of a bump, and I go back to a couple of years ago when they came down here for a game. It was cold. It was minus 1,000 degrees.
Christmas Eve.
Andy Dalton was their quarterback, and they came in here outside of the dome and gave the Browns the business by running the football. I think that Alvin Kamara is going to have a big game in this game. I think they're going to miss, actually, Zadarius Smith. I'm going to say it. I think they'll miss him on the opposite end of Myles Garrett, and I think they're going to make this game a little wild and crazy like you usually get with an interim coach.
Firing a coach gets the attention of the locker room in any sport. It doesn't matter what the sport is, and it sort of gets guys snap to attention. You get a little bit more focus, I think that. And also, a lot of times, these firings are strategically placed to where when you got a game the following week, when you feel like you got a good chance to win. And I think
or you're starting quarterbacks coming back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. So I think a little of that plays into it as well. We have seen example. I mean, Greg Williams, Freddie Kitchens was not fit to be an NFL coach. And Greg Williams came in here, and they played relatively well, like really well, under Greg after Freddie was gone. I'm sorry, Hugh. That was Hugh. That was the Hugh.
Yeah.
But still, Hugh also was not fit to be an NFL head coach, and Greg really came in and turned things around. So there are those examples where it can carry on. I tend to think this is more of the first category. The Saints are not very good. They got a lot of problems on both sides of the ball. And I think they'll probably revert back to form.
We talk about this coaching bump that you get from the interim coach. I think, and I'm curious your thoughts, that teams oftentimes get that same bump when there's a quarterback change. Mm-hmm. And we saw that with the Browns when Jameis came in.
Yep.
Suddenly, they had no problems. Offensive line looked great. Everybody was playing well. So you get that. It's a jolt of energy, and I liked the way you said it. It gets the attention of the locker room. In this case, I agree with your first point. I think the Saints' reemergence has more to do with who's playing quarterback. And when you get your starting quarterback back into the lineup, by the way, their offense was running at a record pace in the first 2 weeks. And then they just fell off the table. I'm not a proponent of Allen. I'm not saying he was a great coach. He probably did need to be fired. But I thought it was a little raw the way they did it. If you want to judge him with the starting quarterback. Give him last week. Give him one more week. But to your point, I think teams strategically make that move so they can make themselves look like it was the right move.
Well, however, in this case, that wasn't the case because the team they played was the Falcons, who had been playing very well before that.
Very well, but they got their starting quarterback back into the lineup. And I think
but it wasn't like they could have fired him when they were playing the Panthers
or the Browns.
Or the Browns, yeah.
All right.